Our record was 270 days straight. That was a couple years ago.
See if you can beat it.
So what?
See if you can beat it this year. You may already be there. I don't know.
30 days straight, or 30 days straight.
We ready to get started? Or you want to wait until 12?
Yeah, just to be,
Okay,
never know who's gonna come in.
true. Is there anybody on there right now? No?
Oh, Rachel's.
Rachel.
I think we can start.
Okay, it's 12 o'clock. So we can get started.
You can
If you want to do roll call, Victor.
Gail Brown,
Here.
do across.
Teresa Johnson,
Here.
Jimmy Nolte,
Here.
and Dan Mulder.
Here.
We have a forum.
All right, next we have approval of our regular meeting minutes for the June 16th meeting. Any comments or questions from the minutes?
Just a small correction. Page 2. Third paragraph, Johnson also noticed that I think it's supposed to be Arbor Street between Pine and Lake, right?
Where are we at?
Third paragraph, last sentence. Johnson also noted.
Oh, yeah. No, it's
Oh, notice just fine. No, I was saying I think it's supposed to be Arbor Street, not Maple. Maple runs east-west, as does Pine and Lake, so.
With the Maple Street, we were looking at trees that were going on Maple Street, which was north-south.
Maple's east-west.
Is it?
Maple Street goes east and west.
Okay, so then what's the street we were saying?
Arbor.
Arbor Street,
Arbor.
okay.
Yeah.
It isn't even really important enough to note.
Yeah, no, it is. Good.
No, good catch.
So I guess.
Okay.
We need
I'll
a,
make a motion to approve. I'll second.
All in favor?
yeah,
Aye.
Forgot for a second there.
that's all right.
All right, so we'll move on to board communication.
Got an item. So we have 2 new council people that are gonna be starting. And I guess Michael Behrman and Kathy Mitchell. And Bill had reached out to them and met with them to go over zoning, what the planning commission's up to and what they've done. And so I sent a note to Teresa and Victor saying I thought it'd be great if we did the same thing. So we're also doing it for Parks Board. So we're going to do it right after Parks Board one next week on Thursday, and we just go over basically kind of our wrap up that we did for council earlier in the year. They'll be up to speed and hopefully in our corner.
Yep. Any other communications for anyone? No? Okay. So we'll move on to public comment. Did we have anyone join the Zoom since we started?
No,
No? Okay. You guys have anything to say, Rachel? Ben? No?
not yet.
Okay. So old business, our street tree plan corridor, which has been ongoing. This last month, we were supposed to have a look at, was it Lake Street?
I have Ann Street between Lake and 119.
Say that again.
Ann Street between Lake and 119.
Okay. Yeah, because I forgot my notes on that.
I
so-
know, lots of, I'm looking at it like, what is that?
And can I just say that I did talk to Lucas about Spring Street and Elm Street that we looked at the previous time. And Spring Street, yes, there is room for trees. We just gotta remember there's power lines, so whatever trees we plant there. This Pine Street, there's also plenty of room, but the school is doing a project there. So I don't know if we want to we probably should coordinate with them on when to plant them. If, I don't think it'll affect anything they're doing there.
What kind of a project are they doing?
Parking
The
lot.
parking lot,
Have you made it yet?
I'm not sure, but we have to coordinate with them, you know, and I'm not saying we're planting these trees right away, but.
Right.
It might be a couple years before we plant trees there, but, I think it probably should be done after they're done with the project, just in case there's any. And I don't think Lucas said they're not supposed to affect this area where we're talking about it, but, I don't know, just, you know, be on the safe
So
side.
I just did a little rough count on how many trees on each side, so I think, you know, like Ben and Lucas would probably have to go back and look at that and see what's in the way and then species. But Teresa and I were talking about if we need to maybe have just a little circle back, how we're approaching the tree plan, like, are we gonna go through each segment that's on that graphic? And then come up with roughly however many trees to be firmed up in the future?
Excuse me, my understanding was we were gonna look at the area and decide what type of trees we want there, like not necessarily specific species, but basically what we want that area to look like. So, you know, do we want a bunch of, you know, tall shade trees? I think the details we can work out with, you know, Lucas and Ben as far as infrastructure and how many trees can actually, so I don't think that's where we're at this stage. So then when we actually focus in on, all right, we're gonna start on, you know, Pine Street, let's do Pine Street, then it's like, all right, let's go to Lucas and Ben to figure out, you know, what number is appropriate and where locations are appropriate.
So maybe what we do then is like get a spreadsheet or something with each of those planning units, if you will, like this street, that neighborhood, so forth. And a rough idea of how many and just the general category of trees, and then maybe we have a meeting where we discuss priorities again, like what ones do we want to start on?
I guess that's up to you, I mean,
I mean, I think the whole point of visiting all of the neighborhoods right now is to see where we're missing trees and then
yeah,
create a plan as to priorities.
Mhm.
And then also the correction from the minutes last month, I think it's Center Street
Center Street,
between Pine and Lake. Because I think Arbor's got plenty of trees. I think it's Center,
Okay.
the one that's right up from that parking lot. Down the back, there's that. A lot of trees towards Lake Street side.
so Jamie's saying, you know, let's go through this, figure out. Go through what our plan was and then figure out the priorities.
Yeah. I think that's what I was saying too.
Okay.
So are we hoping at the end of each planning unit discussion then to come up with what can then go into a spreadsheet, maybe? Like how many trees
Yeah.
and what types?
I
And
think
then to be
that-
refined?
Maybe just like the priority level.
Yeah, because I'm not sure we're at this stage where we can say, all right, we're gonna put, until Lucas and Ben go out there and investigate, you know, how many trees are gonna go on that. I think we need to first get a sense of what we want at each neighborhood and then go into what, you know, once we prioritize, all right, we want to look at Spring Street. All right, then that we send Ben and Lucas to figure the details out. I think that's just the way it works in my mind.
So right now, we're just identifying
Where there's gaps.
spaces,
Where there's
where the,
gaps.
yeah, where the gaps are.
Where there's
Okay.
gaps, yeah, where there's gaps and then we're gonna take that, prioritize what types, what we wanna see there.
Mhm.
And then pick out, you know, that number one priority, start looking into that.
And then we may just want to, at some point, we could do it right now, have a discussion about approach, like, do we want to add a few here, a few here, a few here, or do we want to finish this planning unit before we move on to the next? You know what I mean?
You mean, once we've identified all the gaps? Do we wanna?
Yeah, like, let's say there's two that have like a number 2 priority, or I don't even know how we're gonna assign priorities, but they both need 6 trees. Do we start out with doing 3 in each, or do we get 1 done before we move
I
on?
feel like we could, like, if we, like, we don't have to attack that whole neighborhood, we could say that the Spring Street part is the priority and the school, we're gonna hold off until we know what they're doing. So I think like, even within the neighborhoods, we could pick a priority. And so we're not like completing we don't necessarily have to complete that. It just depends on where the priority
I guess
lies.
I feel that way too, I think.
You can pick and choose like a little bit from each, you know. if you
Yeah.
feel-
Yeah.
Because in some, honestly, some corridors might be missing like 15 trees and it's not realistic to plant 15 trees in one corridor. So it might be like, all right, this year we'll plant 2 trees there and 2 trees elsewhere. I mean,
Right.
this is supposed to be a long-term process, it's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
We can just vote on it each year.
one
As
and done.
devil's advocate, one advantage to doing all in one area is it'd be easier for DPW to keep the gator bags filled up. Maybe that's a small point, I don't know.
And it also depends on whether or not there's irrigation or they decide to put irrigation, so I think we need to figure out these priorities and these areas first, then we can look into the details of what infrastructure is there.
We want to approach it, yeah.
Yeah. This is the overview, right? We're looking at the bird's eye view here, what we want it to look like, then we're gonna, I think, slowly get more specific.
Mhm.
That's my thought.
Okay. So then we want to talk about gaps that we saw in the neighborhoods that we were looking at prior to this meeting.
Maybe. Just to kind of recap,
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
let's see if I've got, Victor, can you put up that neighborhood?
I got these ones with the 3.
And I'm gonna kind of defer to you guys since I left my notes on my desk.
Those two, because I was downtown, so I'm like,
I don't know how
So the
I.
first one you have,
Well, I was actually thinking about this one.
no, I don't have that on me right now.
Which one is that? Oh, yeah.
You have the report to council, it's in there.
I'm not on this computer now.
Oh. Um,
Let's see if I got it. Maybe I can.
yeah.
Okay, so one of the areas that we were supposed to look at was Lake Street from State to 119. Yeah. Were there,
I feel like if you just pull up a map of the city.
Link Street between.
State and 119?
Okay, so the whole,
Yeah.
the whole section of that eastern half here, so there's State Street.
Mark is the guy that.
Did you say state?
Oh, State Street between Lake
It
and.
was State Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's
Okay.
between State Street
So stay
and
all the
then
way
down to
to
119, yeah.
and 119, including Hoyt.
Yes.
Victor, you did some more investigations, right, with the right of way and
Yeah, the right of way is, it is pretty much accurate. It pretty much goes to the end of the sidewalks there. And the reason why we have so little green space on this road between the road and the sidewalk is because State Street is much wider than other roads because we allow parking on both sides. So if you look at State Street north of Lake, it's actually narrower than Lake Street right here. So that's the reason why we have so little green space in between the road and the sidewalk.
went and had another look and I think it's pretty much impossible to put trees in the city right away. And Victor has confirmed that the city just really doesn't want to consider anything where we would buy trees to put on the home side of the sidewalk.
Okay.
So I think that's gonna be maybe a refer to council for beautification in some other way.
You know, and the only other thing that, and I wouldn't even know if I would recommend this also, and I don't know if this is from a DPW or police or traffic flow, is narrowing that road. Would that be a large cost? To increase the green space? It would, I mean, and I think about it from the perspective of traffic of, do we get a lot of complaints, not a lot of complaints, but we get some complaints about parking on that State Street.
The only place I feel like people really park is
right
like,
here.
yeah,
By
the
dam.
Harbor Car Care Park.
Harbor
So
Car
that's
Care.
really interesting, actually.
But so theoretically, but of course, this project will cost money and, you know, there have to be a good reason to do it. But theoretically, if you narrowed it, if you eliminated the parking on each side, eliminate 4 or 5 feet on each side, you turn these into a regular size street. But that'd be you'd have more of a green quarters on each side, but that's a big project. Anyway, so that's the only, I mean, because other option that, you know, Dana had talked about, and to me was about, you know, do we try to get easements from the property owners, which would be cumbersome and probably impossible to do, and it's very expensive. Planting on their own property, the liability is too high for us. The risk if something happens to a tree, it dies, breaks, falls on someone, you know, that's on us if it falls on their house. So I'm not confident about that. And then just having them, you know, take ownership of the tree, well, then they could do whatever they want with that tree. So there's no good solution there. But the only thing I can see that's within actually our control right now really is narrowing that road. But again, I don't know if that's even recommended from a DPW or.
Right, it doesn't seem like a realistic option.
No.
But maybe in the future, if State Street needs to be repaved or something.
If State Street needs to be redone at any
Look
point,
at
if it's
that.
ever gonna be dug up for infrastructure purposes, I think that would be the time to look at whether or not we want to narrow the road down or not. Because you're tearing up the road anyway.
Yeah.
And it's not gonna cost you any money. And that, we try to coordinate all our projects to the greatest extent possible when it comes to the road. So like if we're replacing like water infrastructure, we're like, well, let's replace the sewer while we're at it, you know,
Yeah.
so we, you know, save money, don't have to do it again. Anyway, that's my only thought, because then you would gain 5-6 feet on each side and you'd have a,
I think that'd be really nice, the traffic calming is great.
well, that's what it is too, yeah.
Yeah. Is that on your radar, like when it might be?
I'd have to talk to Lucas if there's any
Okay.
infrastructure project for
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So as far as tree advisory is for trees on state,
No,
we can't really do anything.
right, so
Yeah,
last meeting was just
Yeah.
maybe make some recommendation to council after we go through all this about some beautification.
Okay, yeah, I think that's probably the best way to go, so. So then Lake Street. Noticeable gaps or,
I think by the school,
I think that's what I had written down is right there in front of the school. Again, there's a lack
and
of.
then the parking lot across the street, we could use trees there. And then it's pretty heavily treed the rest of the way out. One thing that drives me a little nuts is some of the trees that have been like really aggressively pruned where they've cut the leaders off. So I don't know if that's something that's possible, Victor, to take it out and put a more properly sized tree there. It's kind of like they've been really butchered, really. Is what
Is it underneath the wires?
Yeah,
Yeah, right in front.
they've cut big trunks.
Linden or something like that, that's been like right in front of the school.
There's a few examples, yeah,
And they're
Yeah.
very obvious.
yeah,
In front of the school right here?
and they look really bad in the winter.
Yes.
So you're asking to replace some of those trees?
Yeah, and then we could pick better scaled trees. So maybe that would be one of our things for that street.
And right there is an area where, not only is Lake Street heavily used by traffic, but you get a lot of pedestrian traffic right there in front of the school.
Mhm.
So it seems like it'd be kind of nice to have.
Slow the traffic down a little.
Yes, and as well as shade the sidewalk a little bit. Not with huge trees, because again, we have the wires to worry about.
And I'm trying to remember which side of the road the wires are on there.
They cross, I think they're on the south side, let me check.
And I wish I had my notes because
They
I
do
actually wrote
cross,
that
yeah.
down.
They cross right here, I think it's, well, they got
And there's your top tree.
They cross in front of,
Spring, it's in front of the black, where, not Blackbird, but the where elementary school was. So they go on the north side of Lake Street. You can see them actually through here.
Okay.
So what if we said for this, should we call it the East Lake corridor? We look at replacing the heavily pruned trees and we look at, trees
Filling in gaps
by the school.
in the school's parking lot.
And across the street.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this could be like, should we start to think about priorities like 1, 2, 3? So I'd say this would be a pretty good priority.
I agree, and I think it would be
Yeah.
easy to do. I mean, it's obviously city owned and we have the space.
So should we say it's a priority 1?
I would. Yeah.
Do we want to worry so much about filling any little holes as we get towards Hoyt? Or I think maybe that's not a big priority because there's a lot of big trees in the yards. there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, this is definitely the biggest gap.
It
from
is,
Private and public.
yeah, it doesn't feel like it's there anywhere else along Lake Street.
I actually avoid walking along there and stay on the side streets because it's just so open.
It's really unpleasant. It's kind of just blistering and
Yeah.
windy when it's windy and
The other corridors, neighborhoods for now to look at?
do you want to talk about Layton Park? Did we kind of look at that or we talked about it? And did we say that we just had a recent project there? Maybe this would be a low priority?
Hard to like identify where trees are necessarily needed because there's not a lot of sidewalks.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would say that's probably a low priority because it doesn't feel like there's big bare spots because it's like yards and there's no sidewalk.
There were a couple of spots, but they've also last year planted some trees.
We
in
planted
there, so-
8, and actually some of the couple of spots that you may have noticed, we've sent letters to a couple of homeowners who were kind of opposed to the idea, and even though it's not their property, we said, all right, we'll go to some owners who might be willing to take care of the tree, because we don't have water in there, so we went to all homeowners who said they would be willing to water the trees instead, because we don't have that infrastructure there, so probably some of the gaps you looked at were probably, we had talked about a couple of years ago.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense because it was strange that you would see, I don't know, you had a couple trees here and a tree there, and then all of a sudden, it's like, why are there trees there that look like, and they look like they were planted by the city because they have the gator bags on them.
So should we just simply say no action at this
Yeah,
time?
for Layton Park,
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. And then the other area was North Lake neighborhood.
Was that by Ottawa?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's fine too.
Yeah,
Big
right there.
trees there already.
yeah,
So no action.
I'm good with no action at this time, yeah.
And then we also were looking at in August uptown west.
Oh, it's, so that's kind of my
Overly?
neighborhood. So
Yeah,
Okay.
and the only place that I thought that there wasn't anything was between like on Harrison between M19 and Summit. It seemed to be a little there.
And I think Arbor Street, between Summit and Lake, I would say.
Let me get first to
I didn't look at
Harrison.
that neighborhood.
So Harrison's right here, and you said between Summit and Lake,
Do you mind blowing that up a
No,
little
between
bit?
M19.
or between M19. I'll blow it
Or
up in a
block,
second.
yeah.
So this stretch right here, so I think you particularly got some right here.
Yeah, there's a
and some
lot
right
that
there.
on both sides. There's not a whole lot right there.
That is true, it's pretty,
And do we have the space on those?
we do have a space here, this is one of those, you compare this to State Street, it's just
Okay,
narrower enough that you have 5 or 6 feet. But I'll double check with Lucas to confirm that there's enough space and infrastructure, but that could be, but this is identified, there's a lot of gaps there, definitely.
For me, Harrison, I think would be like more like a number 2 priority, and Arbor Street, I think would be more of a number 1 priority because that definitely needs traffic calming.
yeah.
I think we should just first fix on Harrison, and then we can go to Arbor, so I'm not confusing my notes.
Okay.
So
So Harrison,
Harrison, Bluff and,
on both sides.
yeah.
Between M119 and Summit. You'd say a medium priority.
Yeah,
You guys need
Okay, now, Dana, you wanted to go to Harbor Street,
or Ann Street, I'm sorry.
Ann Street?
Yeah.
Which is right here. Also between M119 and, or actually the whole thing, huh?
Where are we?
This is Ann Street right here. This is Lake, this is Ann,
there's no sidewalks.
there's no sidewalk.
And the left side, I don't think is city anymore, right? Up there.
I mean, we do
Yeah,
have
it's
the
still
right,
city.
we do have the right of way.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so it'll extend approximately 30 feet from the center. This is also a narrower road than State Street, so.
I would say that stretch just between Summit and Lake, could really use some trees.
What about between M119 right here?
Oh, I guess there too.
Yeah.
Yep.
The whole thing,
People
Yeah, yeah.
fly down that thing, yeah.
all of Ann Street.
What do you guys think about priority? I would say high.
I would say it's a higher
Higher,
priority, yeah.
because it's a bigger stretch.
And there's fewer trees, and especially on this west side, there's no tree. The east side seems to be pretty heavily tree. It's the west side, all right. Can we go back just to quickly to Spring Street? Where this high school was,
That could really use some trees.
yeah. So
So
what
that'd be
priority,
uptown
so
east.
we got the Spring Street between Pine and Lake. What priority would you say that is?
I say that's one because it gets school traffic.
Yeah,
And then same thing with Pine Street between Center and,
I think it's center, like
right, I guess the center, yeah.
between Maple and Lake, I think you can see that house on the right where there's nothing. Right there, that corner and both sides of the.
So center
That's what we were
between
talking about.
Center between Maple.
And Lake, I'd say that's probably a 2.
I agree with that.
Yeah, it's not,
And this Pine between Spring and Center, would that be also a 1 or 2?
I think
Is the school?
2, just because we're waiting to see what the school's doing.
yeah.
I think I would put it as a 1, but maybe we delay it.
All right, Spring and Center. Teresa, I don't know, I mean, we got other things on the agenda, so I don't know if you want to stop here for this today, and because we do got 3 other things on the agenda.
Yeah, that'd probably be a good
So
idea.
we don't-
Should we talk really quick about what we're looking at next month?
Oh, yeah,
Yes,
that's the
yes,
idea.
I would.
And the minutes did have kind of Jamie's suggestion.
Yeah. So West Bluff and then below the Bluff West and Glen Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, low block. And Glenn, you said?
Yeah,
Drive.
I think Glen Drive's gonna be pretty easy, like I could probably say right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just take a drive then.
I mean, there's some people that probably.
Nice drive.
Yeah, well, we've had requests to remove trees.
Because the road is so narrow.
Okay, good. Yeah,
All right, going on.
Like on track.
yep. Okay, so let's move on to new business. And first on the agenda is parks, board tree planning recommendations. Dana?
Yep, we talked about this at our meeting on Tuesday. And I actually had recommendations at City Beach and also at Marina Park. And City Beach people just feel like it's the beach. We shouldn't have to add more trees for shade there.
Okay.
So I two green ones are new trees. This is in the lower part where the tennis courts were not, so we shouldn't run into problems with digging into gravel or whatever.
Those are shade trees.
Shade trees, yep, and then I pulled up a couple pictures of what I would like to use, and certain people may have a problem because they're maples and it's a maple there now, but Fall Fiesta sugar maple, super hardy, brilliant fall color, same thing, October glory maple. Oh, you know what, this isn't what I meant to do, I meant to have one of these be a red maple. So anyways, red color, good red, fall red color. So we could go to some other species. I just think sometimes where you have like a grove like that or a grouping.
What's the existing tree there?
Maple.
It is a maple. What, do you know what time? What
I think
variety?
it's a sugar maple.
A sugar, okay.
We've been trying to stay away from maples. And we have this conversation a lot.
I know we do. I know we
Do
do.
you have any?
But we have an existing maple that we need to. put
Stay
tree-
away from it because
Yeah, let's keep it our
Because
arborist.
it's diversity.
Do you have any opinion on what's pretty? Like, or should
I,
go there?
I have to concur with what Victor's saying, which is that we have a lot of maple in inventory. If we ever get Asian longhorn beetle, we're gonna use like 60% of the tree. Like, it would be better to try to find a different genus, hopefully a different family.
And you could make the same argument that if we ever get oak wilt up there, all those swamp oaks.
Not likely, it's a white oak group tree, so they're highly resistant. But like if we keep planting things like autumn lays, base or plant noides, which is snowy maple, plant red maples, which is conservative, those are all plant host for Asian longhorn beetle, one's much more virulent allergen.
And it comes down to the number of oak we have versus number of maple in our inventory.
Wow.
That's on city property. If you look at all of Harbor Springs, though, which is really what we should look at, we have a ton of
Well,
oaks.
I'll hold on there, Dana, for a second, because we're looking at what we control and own. And, so if we get let's say we get a invasive species that affects some of our tree species, we have to look at what that costs to the public. And for the city, for the amount of trees we have to replace. We don't have to replace trees on private property.
Mhm.
We would be void of trees on public property. So we're looking only at what's on our inventory. We don't control what's on private property.
Yep, I got that.
Yeah, so that's how we have to look at it. And I know we've talked about several times at this board, even before we have all these members, about the 10, 20, 30 rule, about trying to stay away from planting more maples because we already have, what's the population, 45%
Yeah,
of our species? Is that maples? So I think just something to,
that's genus,
That's
so
the
that's
genus.
that would be our 10, right? Like
Yeah.
our 10 would actually be. If we've exceeded our 10%, we've exceeded our 20% and our 30% if we're talking about maples. In defense of what Dan is saying, we have very few sugar maples that we've planted, so we have the same genus family. That species is not represented very well in our inventory. So like that would be the best option if we were gonna talk about maples. Because it's also not a viable host for Asian longhorn beetle. They don't like hard maples, they like softer maples.
I guess this is just sort of a general philosophy kind of thing, is like, are we always gonna rigidly stick to that, or would there be a potential exception where, like in this case, where you've got an existing maple and it may look a little odd to put a tulip tree and a linden there with the maple?
could be, I know every time someone comes to apply to put trees in the street right away, we tell them no maples. So we've been telling them no maples and no exception.
We did Autumn Blaze at Glen Drive last year.
Did we do that
Mhm.
at this board?
Mhm.
Well, and when I've gotten that request, but I'm not allowed them. So, we shouldn't be doing that. If we're really concerned about,
That's gonna be, I mean, I guess if that becomes the talking point though too, which is like we made an exception for this, and continues to be, we made an exception in the White policy. If we used our exception on the Glen Drive, then let's be done with it.
Mhm.
Let's say, okay, we keep kicking the same can down the road, which is that we have to have diversity. I know it's hard because the things that are easy to propagate in nurseries are the things that we plant a lot of, right? We have lots of lindens, we have lots of honey locusts, and we have lots of maples because they're easily propagated. That's what the market drives.
And we should set a good example, I guess, which would not to be to put in something that's.
So are there some trees that would complement the maple that's there that we could consider?
Yep.
And I think that's a really hard. Yeah, that's much more difficult. I think the stuff that, I can see where Dan's going with this, which is the things that are readily available that we can get good success on, because we have lots of data on are the maples, and that's why they're heavily represented in our inventory, is because they work well. The problem is that when this has happened in the past, we have things like Dutch elm disease, like emerald ash borer. And we end up with a lot of those inventories that just collapse when we have something that shows up. And the reason for, and I don't know if you guys have talked about 10-20-30 rule, which is that we don't want any more than 10% of our inventory being one species, which would be like an autumn lace, or 20% being in that same genus, which would be maples in general, or 30% being in that family, which is maples and maple relatives. And the idea is that way, if there's something we don't know about, and I mentioned Asian longhorn beetle because we know it exists, it's been in the United States, it comes and goes in places like Chicago, New York, another heavily populated area with lots of street trees. But the idea with that rule is that then we're planning for the thing we don't know about today, the thing that goes up tomorrow on nursery stock someplace in Asia. But we, so like the ideal thing would be something that is representative of, like ginkgos, where there's only one species, one genus that we deal with, because that's all we know about. It doesn't have a lot of pests because it's a really, really old tree. There aren't a lot of things that have survived with it that would feed on it. But we don't have a lot of options like that. It takes a lot of time for us to kind of, flesh out that.
So looking at our right tree, right place, large deciduous trees, London plane tree would do great there, but it has 0 fall color. So I think we should try and go for that if we can, because it's such a prominent location. I think tulip tree would do great there. The last one we planted, I think, is at Jean Jardine, kind of by that water fountain.
And
Kentucky coffee tree is incredibly ugly in the winter.
so
Agreed. One of the
Husky has had a bunch of Kentucky coffee trees. I don't know if that's a question for them as to how they like it. I think it falls under the messy.
Yeah.
Um,
We could consider one of the disease-resistant elms, Princeton elm or Accolade, one of those.
and yeah, or both, because they're the same genus but different species. So
One is American, one is,
Princeton elm is an American elm. Accolade is a hybrid between an American elm and a Siberian elm, which is resistant to Dutch elm disease.
I think in this case, we stay away from the oaks and acorns probably.
Oh, yeah.
I
And
think it's-
hackberry, I think, is just a trashy looking tree.
which one?
Hackberry,
Yeah. Hackberry is a nice tree for diversity.
it is, but this maybe isn't the place for it.
Right. This very
So maybe, how about,
In a talking point for hackberry, it would be stronger than tulip tree. If they're worried about like wind exposure.
Oh, because the water right there.
Tulip trees can be huge, but they don't have a history of being huge in Harbor Spring. I've never seen a big tulip tree.
It's a very slow growth.
they're very
Tulips?
fast.
They're
Tulip
very
trees,
fast?
Yeah,
Oh, the one that I had in my.
you know where there's a bunch of ones that have done really well is at City Beach.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, the biggest one I've seen was on Otis. Outside of town that had been there for, I don't know, 60 years. But like in the south, they're gigantic. I mean, they're 2.5
Right.
feet diameter and 150 feet tall and they're 40 years old, so covered in those.
So the elms are gonna get kind of a yellow fall color.
Princeton elm would be pretty sound in wind. So I mean, it's a pretty strong tree. Elms are great because they hold up to a lot of like weather events and stuff fairly well.
I don't think the shape of a Zelkova would complement the maple. You like red oaks, what if there were acorns, how bad would that be?
Yeah, it's hard, yeah, it's hard, people running.
Walking in front of the high school or on.
Yeah,
Bluff,
it's bad right
it's
now, isn't it?
Terrible, the acorns. I was just out there this morning and you just want to walk down in the street because it's such a mess. So I don't think I want to deal with that at the Marina Park.
How would we feel about doing a sugar maple and an elm, or are we just off maples altogether? Let's just, if you have any hesitation, let's just not do it. So what if we did two elms? We'd have the two elms, yellow, with the punctuation point with the maple.
It's outside my bailiwick, that's.
He's the arborist, that's, yeah, that's what-
You guys like the sound of
the
that?
way it would work.
I like elms.
The two Princeton elms or one of each?
Did one of each, you'd have more wiggle room to put either one of them someplace else.
Do they grow similarly?
I think accolades.
The leaves are a little different, aren't they?
The accolade is bred to look more like an American elm, but I think it generally has more leaves that are smaller. So the American elm has that nice big elm leaf that the people identify as an elm tree.
I say let's do a couple of those.
And there are other varieties of American elm too. There's a New Harmony and a Valley Forge, which are
Yeah.
also Dutch elm disease resistant. Same species, just a little bit different color.
Let's go with two Princeton elms. I think we do have some outstanding tree donations. So I don't know if this is a priority. I don't know if you guys want to focus on parks this is kind of part and parcel of our neighborhoods, but also different because it's a park recommendation request, so.
I just am looking at pictures, so it looks like Princeton has tiny little leaves in all the pictures I'm looking at.
There is one by the Catholic Church on Main Street. There's actually a hack here too. So south side of the road, close to Traverse Street.
Yeah.
There's both a Princeton elm and a hackberry.
I feel like this is like medium priority, like it would be nice to get it done, but there's, I think, streets that are probably a little higher priority. Like the Lake Street corridor that we were just talking about is probably a bigger priority.
Wonder if it might impact more people at the park though.
Right.
Right, I get that too. I feel like it's just two trees. So is it gonna take away that much from?
It depends on what our inventory is.
True.
We have probably, I want to say, 5 or 6 trees to be planted.
And is that something that we could get relief to help us do something that's like in the parks?
Well, and I think this is also part of why we were trying to get this done in the next couple months, is so when we go to budget season, we can go to council with, what, maybe a plan for how much money, now we have a little more flexibility with money in our tree. If we want to spend, if the council says we want to spend, $5,000 on tree planting this year, because we also got to think we have money for tree maintenance and et cetera, to maintain the trees that we have, which is a bigger issue than planting new trees. But I think at that point, then maybe we can come back and say, for next year, right, we have this much money to work with, this many trees, where do we want to plant them this year? And then if we get additional donations, then we already have a plan, say, all right, these donations that we get are gonna go here, X, Y, and Z.
I guess I feel like as far as these two trees are concerned, we we talked about it, but I think we need to have a little more time to make decisions on what species we would put there. And then maybe,
Visuals and go look at.
could we talk about it at the next meeting
Sure.
with some different ideas other than maple? And,
Yeah.
yeah. All right.